Welcome to the Incredibly Human podcast. Today we are doing part 2 of a series about health and chronic illness and how to heal. Today I'm welcoming again Dr. David Morcom, who's a doctor of pharmacology and functional medicine. Thank you again for being here.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So the last one we talked a lot about, what was wrong, and this time we're talking about what we do about it, and that's my natural disposition. So I'm really excited to talk about that.
Whenever I was really sick, I thought going just to the regular doctor and getting the conventional medicine was the path to recovery, but nothing worked, and everything I was told was very limited. I didn't have a deep understanding, and so I did a little research, read some books, and I was under the impression I need to find the root cause. I need to figure out what is going on in the body, and when I can figure that out, now you have a pathway to resolving that issue, whatever that issue may be.
Yeah.
And so that's where we got in connection, was reaching out to you and finding out that you specialize in this. So what is your path to recovery that's different from, a conventional doctor? Somebody starts feeling sick, why, and they go to a regular doctor versus, this path. What separates it?
So my background is in pharmacology and understand all the biochemistry and the nitty gritty of all the chemistry that's going on in the body. So I was coming with it initially very much from a scientific point of view and looking at a lot of the research and the data about the pharmacology and the kinetics and the outcomes from the data we were just being released by the troves in the last couple of decades. And I felt, a lot of the alternative medicine, maybe they didn't have the nitty-gritty background as much, and so they weren't able to interpret a lot of this data. So we're in this unique place now where a lot of the newer practitioners have all the actual empirical data and mechanisms to better understand. It's a new kind of type of medicine because we can take the traditions of herbalism that have always been used and been time-tested and then understand them at a biochemical and physiological level, exactly how they're acting and things as well. Mm-hmm. So really exciting, and where allopathic medicine is, like they always say, is treating the symptoms, right? It's putting out maybe some fires, it's manipulating some things upstream, but there's some deeper stuff going. The roots to the tree are rotting, and they're not being addressed, and so you're constantly having to manage things and be on drugs forever. Mm-hmm. And natural medicines also can be there because it's not always, it's really how you use these things and combining of all the other aspects. Healing is more than a molecule, regardless if it's natural or not. Right. I think that's a big, important piece. And, but, with these natural medicines, they're really cool just in themselves because these herbs don't just have one molecule. They're hundreds of different constituents that all have their unique pharmacological action that act in a very balanced, almost intelligent way to control and balance physiology instead of just manipulating and pushing receptors and acting on things, right, causing a circumstance to happen regardless. They're different molecules that will balance each other in different ways to create this adaptogenic or modulatory effect. But they also have a lot of the nutrients and minerals and vitamins and things that are necessary to support on that level, to act as the cofactors to help these reactions happen. So, for example, this is with COVID and everything going on, initially people were talking about how elderberry, because it helps strengthen the immune system, this is a big concern that we had to all be worried about because it could worsen the cytokine storm, which is this oxidative storm that is created of inflammation from the virus, getting out of control in the lungs, which leads to pneumonia and distress and death.
Right.
But even when that first came out, it's like that just doesn't make sense. It's not really what elderberry is in traditional ways or from the research, and I wrote about it. And this is a beautiful example because, okay, we have maybe some molecules in there that help support the immune system, but it's not an immunostimulant. It doesn't just cause the immune system to go up. That's a very naive beginner understanding of how that herb works. It's a modulator. So, it's going to help with inflammation. It's not going to just stimulate it and go out of control. powerful. And part of the reason is the other constituents that are in elderberry. So for example, it's got a bunch of vitamin C, which stabilizes the mast cells to reduce this histaminic response. It has a lot of antioxidants that has to quench this fire of inflammation in the storm itself. And then it's got a bunch of quercetin and things in it too. And quercetin is also one of these stabilizers of the immune system, which also has a benefit activity to inhibit COVID, actually. So, this is an example. We have this beautiful orchestrated synergy between different molecules that have a therapeutic effect that can be used for a lot of different things and roles. It's not so specific, and it's not just manipulative. That's what's cool about herbalism, because it has an aspect of pharmacology to it. You can be very clinical and you can shift physiology very fast, but a little bit more of a balanced way, a little less side effects.
Right.
But then where the nutrients and minerals and all the orthomolecular medicine, can be giving us all the nutrients, and if you take them in high doses, can actually have some pharmacologic effects. And then you combine that with all, there's homeopathy and this and that. And so we're in this day now where we have so many resources, and my materia medica is so large with not even just the drugs, but all the natural medicines of all sorts that, and we have all these, the electronic and energy therapies and things like that as well, and lasers, and we have IVs, and just it keeps on going on. So this podcast, I'm really excited to talk about all these things we have, because yes, we are fighting an uphill battle. I think it's good to recognize that there's a lot of toxicity. We're in this toxic stew, but there's a lot of things we can do to heal.
Right. And so what you bring to the table, and it's even in your website, Integrative Wellness. So you're taking, the best of both worlds a lot of times too. And I think that's the true path to healing. You don't dismiss one or the other. You embrace what's true and what's factual about both and put them together.
And you aren't taught about it in school, unfortunately. There should be a nutrition class in every elementary, just as important as anything else. But then as a doctor, in medicine or in pharmacy or as a nurse, we don't really have that much education. There might be like one course you're expected to take, and it's not in the same way at all.
Right.
And even the dietitians that are being trained right now, they're not being trained in this kind of philosophy. It's very much more Western kind of things in the hospital when they're already sick, but not really to deal with the root issues happening.
There's this book, AntiCancer, that I recently read again. And he makes he has a background in medicine too, the writer of that one. And he made a really good point too, that there's a lot of healing to, like, even cancer, that is what we're talking about, a lot of these natural pathways. There's a lot of healing there, but because it can't be monetized, someone can't patent blueberries and strawberries and some of these really healthy foods and stuff, because it can't be monetized or put into a pill form. They don't get the attention. They don't get the research. They don't get a lot of the science behind it, because no one's going to fund something that they can't make money off of.
If you can't patent it,
Right.
But also, it's also the fact that, even if you wanted to study these things in isolation, you could, and you would see benefit in a lot of these studies, and a lot of these studies they're double-blind, controlled trials. But when we actually look at what real healing is, it's multiple variables of diet, lifestyle, and usually, we don't just use one herb. Already one herb has so much complexity, right? But in a protocol, in any herbalism, we usually mix multiple herbs together, even a single formula, and that's combined with many other things usually to really support the body in all the ways that are individualized for that person. So that's when you're doing that kind of testing. That's harder to measure, but
Right.
we have actually, it came out last summer, so it's been a while now, the first study studying the outcomes, which is using the functional medicine approach versus the allopathic at the Cleveland Clinic, where Dr. Mark Hyman is one of the directors there. And he is the director of Institute of Functional Medicine. And, they actually have a full functional medicine center there now. And they've been actually doing a lot of research and collecting this data. And it's very clear that the outcomes are significantly better, and in a very short period of time as well.
Right. And I would speak to people who are maybe questioning this as just, for me, I'm a prime example. I went through it. You went through this. We both got sick. We're having a lot of health issues. And one of the things that my doctor, and I love him to death, he was a really nice guy, my endocrinologist, he said, you're going to read stuff about gluten and dairy and the thyroid and changing, this diet and stuff. There's no studies out there that support any sort of correlation. And, from A to B, gluten and thyroid, there's not going to be any specific correlation. But after speaking with you and kind of doing research and understanding, well, no, gluten affects this affects this affects this then leads to your thyroid, your autoimmunity. Starting to see it that way really opened my eyes that, there might not be a connection from A to B, or there's not any studies of connection A to B, but there's connections from A to B to C to D that eventually ends here and gives you the end result. And I think our health is a prime example of that. And some of these illnesses, it's the process, it's the whole thing, the whole story that's being told. And so...
and we understand that process at a mechanistic biochemical level now, where we can explain every single piece of it, and different people are having problems at different areas and variables that are contributing. So, what functional medicine really allows, it's not just using natural medicine, it's really combining it with diet, lifestyle, stress reduction, exercise, and dealing with our emotions and our thought patterns and everything else, because it's really combining it together to address the individualized problems that are actually happening and occurring. And so it's going to look different for every single person. Again, 10 people can come in the exact same issue and there'll be totally different reasons.
Right.
So we're going to talk about a lot of the reasons that are common for people that I see in my patient population of why they're getting sick. I think that's really important.
Well, let's just dive right into it. In the first podcast, we talked about a bucket, and the bucket is being overflown, and we're the bucket. We can only absorb and hold so much until eventually our bodies can't handle it anymore, and we start to break down. And that's kind of the analogy of the bucket, that, all these outside forces, some of them we can control, some of them we absolutely can't control.
Yeah.
And we're ingesting it, we're breathing it, we're experiencing it. But we can only handle so much, just like a person can only go through so much in life before they have a breaking point. Whether it's trauma or some sort of event, we all kind of have a breaking point, and our immune systems are in the same exact way, right? Eventually it'll catch up to us, and it'll lead to maybe a serious illness, maybe a chronic illness, maybe a cancer, maybe like Alzheimer's or Hashimoto's, or maybe it's just going to be a little frustration, inflammation, a joint pain, bloating, that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that we're not all experiencing it, or we're not kind of headed on that path. And that's kind of how I view it. If we can learn how to heal, but also how to protect ourselves, maybe we can, prevent it from happening and never experience it. Or if we are experiencing it, we can heal from it. So let's dive into it. Let's hop into what's going on in the body, but more so from the perspective of actually healing.
Yeah. And so, going through the bucket and just what goes into the bucket, we started talking about some of the basics there, but I don't think I mentioned all the things that go in the bucket, and it's a lot. These are all things that create stress and inflammation in the body. And so, we're going to talk about gut issues. Obviously, this is where 80% of inflammation comes from, where all 80% of neurotransmitters come from. There's toxicity. There's nutrient deficiencies like the vitamin D and omegas that are so common, magnesium as well, right? And then we're going to be looking at hormonal imbalances. We're going to look at chronic infections, people that have Lyme or herpes or, other kind of Epstein-Barr things that you wouldn't think is a huge deal, just are much more at risk for these autoimmune conditions because they already have that other load. So once they get more toxicity and gut issues, that can cause more issues, obviously. Right. And then there is the diet. Let's talk a little bit more about what's in our diets, what that are leading to disease, and the ones that we have from the research and how they're doing it.
Where would you want to start? I know whenever we first came in contact, it was let's address the gut. That was the very first thing.
I mean, that's where we start most of the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, not always. Some people have very particular issues going on, but I would say 80 to 90% of patients, if they're having gut issues, you're going to start there. It's the biggest bang for the buck. It's the thing that, if you address this root source of inflammation, all the other systems on top are falling back into place. And like you experienced, I mean, you didn't believe me when I told you, but in a single month, of doing some gut work, you're having resolution of symptoms you've been having for long periods of time.
Yeah.
And so when the gut is damaged, to summarize, we have permeability, leaky gut, and microbes and toxins and food particles that are coming into the system. And this creates a highly inflammatory response. 80% of your immune system is there to defend you. And so it just starts attacking everything, attacking your own cells. That's autoimmunity, creating inflammation that throws everything else off. So if we can seal and heal and repair that gut, all the immune system calms down, relaxes, feels safe, and it's able to stop attacking itself. So you have Hashimoto's autoimmunity, for example, then it'll stop attacking your thyroid, and your thyroid can come back online, and you can get off your medicine. So it's something that I see regularly. And so from the allopathic point of view, again, they're saying that autoimmunity is uncurable. We have no research on what's causing it. Well, because it's not one specific thing for every single person potentially, but we do have a lot of data on actually all these things that are increasing the risk of these various different chronic diseases, and just individualized. And so the gut is definitely a huge aspect there.
Yeah, I didn't know much about gut impermeability, leaky gut. I had heard of it, but I didn't conceptualize it. I didn't understand it completely. So if someone was listening to this and like, leaky gut, what is he talking about? What is leaky gut? What's actually happening, and why is that such a huge factor into, our immune systems being stressed?
Basically, when there's permeability, all these things from the outside world are coming inside, and our immune system doesn't like it. These foreign particles, they aren't dangerous, they're innocuous a lot of the times, but they shouldn't be coming in the bloodstream. So our immune system creates all these antibodies to this, creates this inflammatory response, sees it as a pathogen and an enemy, and it starts creating an inflammatory response to deal with that threat. And, that affects our nervous system, throws us into fight or flight, for example. Any kind of inflammation in the gut creates inflammation in the brain. And when you have a lot of toxins, for example, fungus has over 79 different toxins in it, candida. And so people that have a lot of candida have a lot of toxicity and liver issues that start to happen as well. And these toxins, again, collect in the brain. The fungus climb up the vagus nerve into the system. It rewards you when you eat sugar and things it likes. It acts on the substantia nigra, on the dopamine, to actually reward you, so that reinforces that cycle. And when you eat things that it doesn't like, or you start using antimicrobials to kill it off, or just changing your diet, sometimes these guys die and they release a lot of toxins into the system, making you not feel good. So we have a lot of interesting data right now on the microbiome and the intestinal permeability, and how they're interconnected, and how these toxins, these endotoxins that the bacteria overcreate, lead also into this intestinal permeability. That's one piece here that's causing that damage. And that's a lot of things. When people are coming in, they've removed all these things, they've been gluten, dairy free, they've even maybe been taking some supplements, but it's not going to kill off that fungus and bacteria. We have these, well, not always, sometimes we can if it's like a lower grade infection, but there's these things called biofilms. These are mucosal layers of these kind of a group of these pathogens and viruses and bacteria and fungi. And it creates a shield around themselves to protect them from your immune system and also from antibiotics. And these are films in the gut, and sometimes can be in the mucosal layers, etc. And they just make it harder to be able to kill. So sometimes we really need to use antimicrobials and to be able to use biofilm disruptors, and we switch them up, and we have to get to the right dose, to really kill them. And so a lot of times that's necessary.
Right.
And then you can do the diet, lifestyle and stuff, and then kind of, do it from there. That's one aspect. Also the pesticides and things, like we're saying, that those create a lot of inflammation and damage to the gut. We also have all the other toxins that we're exposed to, and the metals. We also have all the antibiotics that kind of kill off all the good guys in the microbiome, and again feed a lot of the fungus. This can be a big trigger for a lot of people. But then we have the other drugs like Advil, which is a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, and how that just put holes in your gut. Same thing with steroids. These things, a lot of times are used to quench the inflammation in the body very regularly. I've had a lot of patients come to me where that was one of the main triggering events, is maybe they're in pain or that they had a surgery and they're just on lots of Advil for long periods of time, and their guts get damaged, they have intestinal permeability, and all the other systems start declining. So, things like that are important to understand.
It's funny you mention that, because that was one of the first things for me. Was I went to a doctor, thought I had a sinus infection, took antibiotics, and it was like after that, a lot of my other symptoms really started kicking in. So you think you're getting healed for something, and it's the right thing to do, but a lot of times there's damage being done from a lot of these pharmaceuticals.
We want to remove a lot of the things that we've been talking about and avoid those things at all costs, especially, antibiotics when you're young. If you have children, my philosophy is to use things that are more natural, that have less side effects, probably first and foremost, to be able to even prevent these things in the first place, just to be strong and vital, to not have to have these issues. But if you start having these symptoms that develop, you may use natural medicines that are more gentle and have less side effects. And then, at that point, maybe you could go to a natural medicine doctor or something if you're not able to handle it yourself, because it can get pretty complex. And then if you know that for some reason things aren't going, you could then go to another doctor, or you can go through the allopathic system. It's not always bad in any way. Sometimes we need a very quick response to have to feel better, to get us through a difficult time, to be a bridge. And that's how I see a lot of these allopathic medicines, is that I have a practice where I don't feel like I need or am hindered at all by not having them. But because of all the cool technology that we'll talk about. But, sometimes we need to use it as a bridge, and that's okay until we can fix the underlying root systems that are causing inflammation, to get the nutrients back into the body so we can obtain that vitality and wellness at a more root level.
So somebody has to take antibiotics. They have to.
Yeah.
What is something they could do in addition, like prebiotics, probiotics, other supplements that they could take to kind of help protect their body? Is there...
Yeah, there's a lot of things they can do. And so when you have to take antibiotics, every antibiotic is a different spectrum of activity. So this, can vary. You can choose different probiotic strains according to that. But I would say generally, most of these antibiotics are antibacterial. If you're taking one for pneumonia, etc., right? And so you want to recolonize with good, healthy bacteria. And there's very specific strains of lactobacillus and bifido that have been well studied to help recolonize. But then, in addition to that, if there's a bunch of fungal overgrowth, for example, we might use some Saccharomyces boulardii or another good healthy yeast that's able to then inhibit the fungal overgrowth that's happening as well. But when there's antibiotics, what's cool is that you can use this Saccharomyces boulardii, and you can take it while you're taking the antibiotics and have a very supportive effect because it's not killed by the antibiotics. So during, you can supplement with this kind of very specific fungal strain, this beneficial fungal strain. That can be helpful. And then, definitely just really recolonizing after the 10-day regimen or whatever it may be over. And you really want to do some heavier doses, a good maybe 50 billion twice per day or something like that, or really start integrating a bunch of fermented foods. It's even better.
Just restore everything that was lost.
Yeah, because, when you're using natural, foods like fermented foods, for example, even one serving could be a trillion bacteria, CFUs in a single serving, where when you're buying these very expensive probiotics that, even the best ones maybe are 100 billion or something like that, right? So it pales in comparison to being able to get some of these fermented foods in the diet. But I do want to really stress that, it's not, you can't just take antibiotics and then you take a probiotic and that completely eliminates the risk, because a lot of people are like, well, I'm taking probiotics, so it's okay. But it's kind of like nuking the system, and these antibiotics are very broad spectrum in a lot of ways and can kill a lot of different types of strains, and they eradicate them in many ways, or really lower them and devastate these populations. And you got to think about every microbiome is a different world, different planet with these different types of microbes that have different functions for your physiology. And you get rid of all the builders, you get rid of all the engineers, right? Or something like that. And you just want to repopulate with cavemen that do this specific thing. Well, they've created these networks and these communication highways and these different things to very intelligently do what they do. And you kind of nuke the city. You can't just recolonize and expect everything to be good and great. So, you want to avoid it as much as possible. And, the common thing that I see, actually, it's a very typical pattern, so I want to talk about it, is that, so say, even starting off life, your microbiome is affected by your mother's microbiome, actually. So there's a lot of data and research that some of the microbiome will kind of go and migrate to the cervix, and the microbiome even starts before birth. But then, we have the aspect of just when you go through the vaginal canal, like a normal natural birth, you're actually, the mom, her vaginal flora of bacteria changes right before childbirth to inoculate the baby before it comes out in this world with the good, healthy bacteria that jumpstart the immune system. So when the rates of C-section are, 34% or more, it's pretty amazing here in America. It's no wonder a lot of us are starting off with this kind of very imbalanced microbiome because we're coming out the skin here. So we have more Staphylococcus and other strains of bacteria that are not what's supposed to be there, really, And so the rate of allergies or inflammatory disorders or autoimmunity and eczema, etc., are all highly increased through, just being a C-section baby by itself, asthma and things as well as any hyperinflammatory disease. And then on top of that, then if you're not breastfed, back in the day, they're told that, now it's breast is best, definitely. I think we definitely know that right now. But then you think about how much toxicity is kind of coming out from the mother, and typically, and this is scary, but so everyone knows, 25% of your toxic load as a mother is transmitted to your young just through childbirth and through breastfeeding. So if you're going to do work to work on yourself and work on your health, please just do it even before. And so it'll make pregnancy so much better. And, you don't have to go through the mood imbalances and the fatigue. The childbirth was a very joyful thing. I talked to a lot of the older, wise women in the communities and the elders, and just that, from what I understand, I'm not speaking as a woman that's gone through it, but just from my wife's experience, and also talking to other people, that it wasn't as difficult of a process as we see now. There wasn't as so much mood instability, fatigue, and other symptoms that were happening, complications. So it's going to help that, but then it's also going to start your baby off with clean, with not fighting this uphill battle.
Right.
And so whether it's the gut microbiome or detoxing the body, that all is really important. And then, lastly, the big, huge thing that knocks people out very early on in their life, which is not a fault of their own, is any kind of antibiotic use in the first 3 to 4 or 5 years. And it's because the microbial environment is just developing, and, things are just forming. And so when you nuke the system at that very early age, it can cause mass this devastation to, everything else coming afterwards. And so say there was a nuke in New York City, that would be really sad. Of course, but civilization would move on. But say we nuked Africa when Homo sapiens were first arising. Maybe the Neanderthals would have taken over and this world would be completely different, right? And so this early devastation leads into a lot of problems and issues. And what happens is then they have a weaker immune system because the microbiome is a key portion of that. And they get more allergies, and then they have more sinus issues, and they have more, visits to the doctor, and they're given more antibiotics. And then that causes that vicious cycle to go on. And we could talk about all sorts of things that are
right. So childhood cancers and autism, and a lot of this stuff that happens real early, and we don't understand why. Because a lot of people I know, they think a lot of things that cause cancer we experience over time through our lives. Why are our kids, when they're really young, why do they have cancer? They're not exposed to all this stuff. They're not exposed to a lot of toxins and radiation and some of these issues. They're not smoking as babies. A lot of these things that we know cause cancer, BPA and stuff like that. But we have children who are, and it's becoming more and more common, disabilities and autism and cancer. Is this what's stimulating a lot of it?
It's a lot. There's so many different variables, and these are huge ones for sure. I would say it's an interesting research study was just completed a couple weeks ago, and it's a little controversial, but it's on the subject of vaccinations. And I'm certified in immunizations, and as a pharmacist, I learned all the ins and outs of why and what and how. But there are what people need to understand is that every vaccination is different, just like every drug is different. You would never say all drugs are safe or all drugs are bad or good or anything, because everyone's unique and different. And that's how you need to look at these as well. And there are certain ones that maybe have a higher benefit to risk ratio that you might consider because, that disease is really prevalent or, and it causes a lot of problems, etc. But a lot of these things are not as prevalent and have been gone and eradicated, or you have very low, problems when they do arise, for example, and you would weigh that against the risk, and there are a lot of documented risks now. And, this study looked at a comparison of vaccinated and unvaccinated children in a practice of a integrative doctor that was doing informed consent and really telling each person about the benefits and risks. That's really by law what should happen, but it doesn't really happen. People don't talk about the risks. And it should be an informed decision for parents to be able to make. And, he did this, and he was actually even doing immunization schedules that delayed things a little bit, because when you have so many, 20, 30 different ones right when you're born, that can really stimulate the immune system, start creating this inflammatory response much earlier on. So a lot of people, even if they want to do vaccinations, they'll delay it a little bit. And I think that makes sense, in a lot of ways. It's more costly for the healthcare system. It's just convenient because they're there already.
Right.
And they're like, okay, let's just get it over with. But it's really, if as a parent and that I have a child, I would definitely, space that out. But even that, in the comparing those kind of more modulated schedules, there's just a huge difference in the amount of outcomes and patient visits. That's how they were measuring this. They measured it through multiple other ways and markers as well. And it was very clear that the kids that were vaccinated had a lot of these hyper-inflammatory response and allergies, and their immune systems are weak, or were having infections, and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And so,
but it's a collection of multiple things. It's not necessarily just specifically vaccines. And I think that's something that really needs to be highlighted because, whenever you put everything together, it tells a different story. Kind of like what we were saying about A, B to C, and trying to understand what's going on in our bodies. So to completely vilify just one thing and say this is causing this, vaccines cause autism.
Sure.
That's not the whole story. There's so many other aspects to the body that also tell the grander story.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about vaccinations, just recognizing that certain populations it makes sense for, and certain ones it's not.
Right.
And even talking about the COVID vaccination, there's many different companies that make that with different risks and things as well. And it is kind of scary. It's an RNA vaccine that replicates that kind of viral protein or epitope inside your own body. And so you're making this inflammatory protein through your own cells. And, it is genetic, and it's never been used before in this way. And there's studies and research was really pushed, and it was really fast. But from the studies that we've already seen here, there's definitely a clear connection with a lot of these inflammatory disorders and a lot of neurological complications and autoimmune issues. And so, people that have a lot of autoimmune issues already, they have a lot of inflammatory, their symptoms are very high. That would be something as a contraindication that you might consider, because, when you're But even a regular vaccine, when you're putting all these inflammatory molecules in the body and you're already toxic, your gut issues are over, and you're already in autoimmunity, your immune system's already hyperreactive, this can be the triggering event for a lot of people that bumps them into full autoimmunity, where the immune system becomes so haywire that it just starts attacking itself.
Right.
So, again, everyone's different, and I think it's just important for people to know the facts on all sides of what they're engaging and what decision they're going to make. And then when they've been informed, they can make the decision for themselves, and that should be respected,
Yeah. Well, I think it's also difficult because we're all put in kind of this do or die situation right now. It's really hard because right now our hospitals are overwhelmed. ICUs or the beds are full. So we're in this position where it's like we need to take part in something. Right now we're seeing a virus that's causing a lot of death and a lot of issues and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, it's difficult because this one was like, we got to figure this out really soon. This vaccination versus other times where we're all vaccinations. We're trying to roll out to prevent some sort of epidemic or pandemic. But yeah, with this one, it just makes it difficult because it's like you kind of got to figure this out soon. Do I take it? Do I not take it? If we don't take it, we're also risked with COVID causing a lot of that stuff, causing your immune system to over-respond and lead to high inflammation, which leads to lung issues, and then you end up on, oxygen in the hospital. So it's one of those things where what we're talking about now, which is starting to heal your body and calm the immune system, I think if we did this first and try to really, really push this ideology, that way we're all at a less risk of COVID or even vaccinations.
Sure.
If you can calm everything, take care of your body and lower that inflammation and get some of these toxins out of your body, then you won't have to be so worried about which do I choose. Do I take a vaccine and risk COVID or risk this, or do I not take it and risk COVID? So I think that's what's so valuable about the information we're about to explore and how to heal naturally.
And just like even focusing on the functional medicine aspects of like, okay, we could use natural medicine to stimulate the immune system, but where's the center of the immune system? That's the gut. And if we have all these toxins, that's creating this inflammatory response where our immune system's dealing with all that, and it's wasting resources and draining it. So it's not focused on all the things that it needs to be doing. It's focused on the bacterial overgrowth. It's focused on this toxicity, that your body targets as this kind of, enemy. And so when you are exposed to a virus, when you are, et cetera, you will be weaker.
Right.
Yeah, so just wrapping up on how really to address a lot of the digestive dysfunction that is such a root cause of a lot of the inflammation in the body. We have something called the 5R framework of gut restoration in functional medicine that's really critical to understand of how we do this magical work of resetting this root system so quickly and effectively. And so it recognizes simply that the gut is pretty complex. The microbiome, as we've been talking about, there's so many variables and pieces. So we can't just take a probiotic and expect it to fix and balance everything. But if we can address all 5 of these areas at the same time, we can reset the system in a very quick period of time. So for most of my patients, 2 to 3 months, I would say. And everyone's a little different, but that's the general. And so the first one is removing, and it's removing a lot of these factors we've been talking about in the podcast so far that are causing the inflammation and damage to the gut, causing this intestinal permeability. That point, we also will remove a lot of the foods, the gluten and the dairy and other inflammatory foods that are causing problems, a lot of the carbs, grains, and sugars that are actually feeding the fungus and bacteria to kind of just clean up the diet, lower inflammation. That's all part of that first one, remove. And then 2, we go to replacing the digestive secretions and enzymes to really make our guts very good at breaking down our foods well so we can optimize our nutrition, but also prevents feeding a lot of the fungus and bacteria. And we have a nice acidic stomach that inhibits the growth of a lot of these pathogens. 3 is to re-inoculate. We want to re-inoculate with very specific strains of different bacteria that are well studied, and fungus and things as well, to re-inoculate the gut. So, when we go in there and kill them all off, we can't just kill, we want to regenerate this microbiome as well. And then lastly here, one of the really important ones is repairing the gut. And we have that intestinal permeability. Things are coming into the system. This is the main source of inflammation and then leading to autoimmunity and other chronic diseases. So we got to not just replace and take a probiotic filter. We got to repair the ecosystem itself where these guys live so they can colonize and stay in good balance. And so, we use very specific nutrients and minerals and vitamins and L-glutamine and aloe vera and slippery elm and marshmallow root. These are all mucilaginous herbs that coat and soothe the entire digestive tract. And then, that's the 4R, but we added a 5th R, and I think that's really important because it's rebalance. It's rebalancing the nervous system, rebalancing your life, and, rebalancing work stress and home stress, rebalancing our connection to the world around us, the natural world. So, that's an important piece of just being in a calm and grounded state. So that's a cool framework. If you're having digestive issues, if you're having chronic disease, a lot of people are just focusing on killing or just taking a probiotic. But if you address all 5 at the same time here, you really can reset the system in a very quick period of time.
So what's next in that bucket of issues that you can address as a practitioner and somebody like me who's sick can find healing?
Yeah, I think the next one that I would bring up right away is just the topic of toxicity. And we talked about in the first podcast of just how much toxicity we're living in right now and how these affect the cells and the ability to produce energy at the most basic cellular level at the mitochondria. Depending on the toxin, they all do different things, but they're fat soluble in general. They collect in the body and they build up in the body. And a lot of the neurological decline and depression, psychiatric issues are very much connected to this because the brain is one big thing of fat. Mm-hmm. And so we really want to just find out ways that we can keep up with the toxicity of our world to not collect these things. And the first step is just avoiding it. And we talked a little bit about some of that as well. Let's maybe talk about and focus more on just ways to like very effectively and safely get it out. And, I like talking about toxicity next because I think more in the public consciousness, people are interested in understanding that the gut is connected to a lot of these problems. Like we're starting to understand about leaky gut, et cetera. Mm-hmm. At least they're big tag words. But toxicity is not something I feel people are talking as much about because it's also a little more complicated in how to deal with it and get them out and the understanding about them. But when I deal with my patients, a majority of them have a good amount of toxicity, and it's a big part of the way I get people better very quickly is by doing this base gut work and detox work that is so important. It's really the main sources of inflammation that drive off all the other systems of the body. And I find if I just do this basic work, successfully, all the other systems really fall back into place. And then if I need to fine tune, it just goes back a lot easier without long-term supplementation. So you want to do this root work. And I've even created something called the Vibrant Life Community Cleanse, and we're starting next month. And it's that exact same concept that I've seen, so many thousands of patients, and they all have these very similar patterns that are going on, and they're paying me a lot of money to do it, and it's very expensive for them, and sometimes, depending on what's going on, with consultations and the labs and follow-up. But that's the best way if you're sick and you can be individualized working with a practitioner. But I've created this kind of choose-your-own-adventure that has a solid base of month of gut work, teach you how to really do that. Some people might need to do more, but we teach you about that. And then, we do a month of really cellular detoxification. And it's a way that I'm able to see a lot more people in a kind of a group visit format that we do these lives and there's office hours and things, but we can individualize it. I have like these different decision points of how to, what to bring on, what additional supplement, what thing might be helpful for you if you're having this symptom.
Right.
And so, I was able to, I've only done it one time before. This is the second time around, but I had autoimmune patients that I never had seen before.
Right.
And they went through this kind of generalized process, really focused on fixing the gut, detoxifying the body, and their autoimmune symptoms had dropped probably to 10% of what they were, and they're almost completely better, and without kind of more specific individualization or labs. So I'm all about labs, but I've really fine-tuned my intuition and clinical just pattern recognition over seeing so many patients. Like I've seen thousands of genetic analysis of every single pathway that makes their biochemistry unique. And I've looked at the actual biochemistry in the moment of everything that's happening and all the hormones and everything else. And I know their story and I know their symptoms. So I've been able to just recognize these similar patterns, and I've just created from this place to try to help more people that don't have the money to maybe see someone more individualized.
Right.
So that's how much I believe in just dealing with toxicity. It's a really key portion for a lot of people. Everyone's got some toxicity building up. We've all got exposure. Some people are a lot better at breaking it down than other people. And people that are not breaking it down, they're the canaries in the coal mine that are getting sick. So, ways of doing it. So first of all, detoxification is a highly nutritionally intense process. To make these enzymes, to break down these toxins in our liver, for example, you need a lot of these precursors and amino acids to be able to make these things, but also all the cofactors and B vitamins and glutathione and these different minerals like molybdenum, etc. And then we can use different herbs like milk thistle, et cetera, that can really improve the liver function and actually repair it. And
so there is a way to suck these toxins out. We were talking in the first podcast and maybe in earlier, they're fat soluble. Or a lot of them are, not all of them, but they're in the tissue and it's really, really hard to get out. But if you know the right way, you can really get in there and you can force them out of your body and flush it out.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just drink a bunch of water and exercise a bunch and expect it to come out.
Yeah.
But detox is can be dangerous. This is just a big important thing to understand, that if there's a bunch of heavy metals, you're in high inflammatory response, you're already in autoimmunity here. These are things you want someone to guide you and individualize very specifically, because more is not better, faster is not better to get these things out. And sometimes they create a lot of inflammation as they're coming out. These are the typical detox symptoms that can happen. But if we strengthen the gut and get kind of lower inflammation a good bit first, that's really the first step. Because the microbiome, like we said, 40 to 50% of biotransformation, transforming these toxic substances inside our body and from outside of the world, happens in the microbiome. So if we can really strengthen that first, that's just going to take a lot of load off the liver, lower inflammation, get you stronger to deal with any kind of detox. And then really, we're not trying to pull out into things a lot of times initially, because that can, again, overwhelm. So we're trying to get what's already there and it's easily available to get out of the system.
Right.
And so, just bitter herbs and bitter foods in general are really great for that. Anything that's bitter, it helps secrete the bile. And bile is actually something that helps us absorb vitamin D and vitamin K, these fat-soluble vitamins. It's also the exit vehicle for toxicity to leave the body. And so anyway, we can stimulate bile secretion, that can be helpful for that process. So this can be like dandelion, this is something that grows in the yard in Texas here, and you can, juice those, for example, or you can make your own kind of bitters or buy some bitters. This helps with digestion and helps with a lot of aspects. But the problem there is that people are taking all these bitters and all these, great antioxidants and all these nutrients, etc. And your body starts to break down these toxins. Whether is it very fast? That's one thing. Is it very efficient? Depends on your genetics and what's going on and the type of toxin. So, when your liver does all that work, it secretes it out through the bile into the small intestines, and 80% of those toxins are reabsorbed into the system. And so, we're not doing it very effectively, but it's also not very safe, because some of these, when they come back, create more oxidative stress and inflammation, and those are those detox symptoms of the fatigue or brain fog or the rash or the headaches, etc. Right. And so, if we can, I always use binders in my practice and things as well. And I use liposomal nanoparticle technology that just goes underneath your tongue, and the medicines in these little fat spheres, and they're at nanoparticle size. So when we squirt them under our tongue, they go directly into the bloodstream. They're little Trojan horses. They're able to go into the cell membranes, the fat tissues of the liver or the body and the brain. They're able to bind and break these things down and help with their metabolism. And so, we just are so lucky to have some of this technology of ways to do these things from home very safely and effectively and cheaply these days, compared to all the other ways we had before. But a lot of this stuff, probably a practitioner is important, or a guide in some way, because you need to know what you're doing.
Right.
But there's education about that, and that's what I'm passionate about. Is really moving from seeing just one-on-one people, but just through education, helping more people at a bigger level. But we can talk about also some detox things that wouldn't require a practitioner, just kind of different methods as well.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of foods out there. There's a lot of juicing and doing things to really take care of your liver. Our liver is one of the main infrastructures of absorbing toxins and cleaning our blood and everything. So there's from what I understand, there's some things you can do that's just more natural and cheap or more affordable, and that's with staying hydrated and being more hydrated, taking care of your liver, protecting your liver. So what would be some of these other ways that we could detox?
Just overall, like you said, the cruciferous vegetables as a food group, just mention that real quick, because it upregulates every antioxidant detoxification systems in the body through something called the NRF2 pathway. And so just getting a lot of that in our diet, all the nutrients and antioxidants, these are all the different colors in our food. So just eating a really colorful diet, eating the rainbow every day. My child's not old enough, but I plan to get a little checklist of the different colors, and have a little rainbow where he will check or do a color every time he eats a food, and let's try to eat the rainbow every day, and I just think that's such an amazing thing to just support your health. They all do different things. The brighter the color, the more antioxidants, and they really all help with detox.
Yeah.
And so, kind of preventing toxicity building up in the first place, like constipation is a huge issue. You need to be going every single day. If you're not going every day, that's not normal. So many people have lived in existence where every other day or every few days is their normal, and they think that's okay. But that's the way we eliminate and get these things out that our liver is working so hard, and that we're going to have a lot more reabsorption. This can lead into a lot of hormonal imbalance and inflammation in the system. And then staying hydrated, like you said, of lemons and limes, electrolytes, remineralizing our bodies. We have, a lot of hydration. And that's key to kind of get flow into the lymph system. And the lymph is the sewage system of the body that helps get these toxins out of the system. So our lymph system doesn't have a heart. It's only through movement where we really can move these toxins and things through the system. So that's why movement and exercise is key, just in general. That's why people feel so much better. There's so many things that are positive about exercise. Of course, that's just one.
Right. Yeah. I didn't know much about the lymph system until getting sick and looking into it and learning that it was the sewage system. And you can do like hot and cold showers, and you can do like dry brushing to help kind of push things along. And I've even got like a little swollen nodule, to just speak to what's actually going is your lymph system is holding on to a lot of stuff. That's usually a sign of infection.
And then there's like some more kind of medicinal ways you could look at that you can do at home. And so one is like maybe buying an infrared sauna, and if you're really toxic, that can be pretty helpful and a nice investment. They're under $1,000, I think my clinic sells them for now, and they're portable, and you can just put them in the corner, take them down, but that vibrates the membranes of the mitochondria and the cellular membranes where these toxins are hiding, and helps it just go directly into the sweat. So a lot of these infrared saunas, they don't go into the bloodstream like maybe a traditional sauna might, so it avoids less of this detox reaction.
So infrared does a little more than a regular sauna?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Helps,
I didn't know that.
Does a lot of things. Helps activate the mitochondria, but for detox, it's great on all levels. Just upregulates the evolutionary systems that have been developed over millennia to do what it does best, is break these toxins down and excrete them. But then we also have things like coffee enemas, and this is kind of a weird one. And I offer in my clinic all these other ways to not force people to do these, but honestly, they're really effective and they're really cheap. So when people are really sick and they don't have that much money, it's definitely something that I recommend. It upregulates the master antioxidant detoxifier of the body, glutathione, by 600%. And that's a really expensive molecule when you're buying it in a liposomal form, as you may know. And so it's really nice if you can upregulate your body's own production of that. And it's acting on the liver. Even though it's an enema, it goes into the liver to secrete all that bile that's filled with all that toxicity out. And then it goes into the colon, and then, the coffee actually is washed out into the toilet to have its benefit.
Wow.
So it's really more liver focused, but it helps kind of with the gut and things as well. And it's something pretty cheap and affordable. It's not regular coffee. I mean, definitely look it up and do what they say, but it can be effective.
Really? Yeah. I did not know that.
Yeah, and people that are very sick, like the Gerson therapy, he was very successful with people who had extreme stages of cancer, etc. They're doing coffee enemas 3 or 4 times per day, and that's a little excessive, and I don't think everyone needs to do it, but if it's a life or death thing, that makes sense. Patients I'm working at, even doing it once or twice, a week can just be helpful for this process. Slowly, little by little, get these things out. Again, we're not in a rush. We don't want to get these things out too fast. I've had a lot of male patients that are all about like just doing it and doing it regardless. And they may be constipated or they might be feeling horrible, but I'm just going to push through the pain.
I don't want to get healthy quick.
And that's not a good way to do it,
Right.
And
I'm one of those people. I wanted to get healthy as fast as possible. Yeah. But I understand that you can't do it too fast because it could actually come back and bite you if you push too fast with it.
When these toxins build up in the system, the liver starts slowing down in its function. And the liver is the manufacturing plant of the body. And so when it's not working very well, everything else is affected pretty quickly. And a lot of the hormones are actually made in the liver. And so what happens a lot of times is the people coming with a lot of hormonal imbalances and symptoms there, they really have just a lot of liver dysfunction due to toxicity building up. And, when it's not able to break down these toxins, there's a backlog. It's not breaking down all the estrogens in the body and other things that are not toxins outside of the body. We just have metabolic waste that we're creating all the time, like especially in our mitochondria, because we're making energy. It's a combustible process. Just like if there's a coal mine or something like that, or a coal factory, there's going to be smoke as a byproduct, and we need to metabolize and break this down and quench that to be able to really, prevent some of these issues. And so, a lot of the hormonal symptoms are connected into the liver issues. So, initially in my time as a pharmacist, actually, I was trying to do more integrative things to be happy and feel like I was really helping people. And I was really into bioidenticals for a while. These are atom for atom, exactly what's in your body. And so I was very good at manipulating the hormones. I had periods where I was really good at manipulating the chemistry, neurochemistry of the brain, working with mental health patients. But I just realized, again, if we can go to these root systems and fix the gut and detox the body and balance the nervous system, for example, then these things will really just, they'll resolve by themselves, and they'll stay resolved. They're not going to keep on coming back and having these problems and issues.
We live in our Western diet is high inflammation. It's a lot of fried food, unhealthy food, greasy food, processed food. So in terms of healing, when it comes to food, we have to change our mindset of what food is. It's not just something that we do to stave off hunger. It's something that our body needs and to thrive,
Yeah.
So when we address food, and you kind of talked about the rainbow, what are the types of foods that we really need to avoid? If we had one that was like, hey, here's the stuff we do need to eat, but here's the stuff we need to really stay away from.
Yeah. And I'd say that everyone's different. Everyone's got different genetics, and people have different food sensitivities that build up over time. And the goal is to be able to eat freely and not worry about it too much, when you're in balance and you've done that work and you're not in disease. But when you're in disease, you really need to be more aware of it, especially. And then people that regain their health in that way just usually will stick to good dietary things. They feel so much better.
Yeah.
My patients, I don't feel like I have to nag at them in any way. I mean, I explain what's going on. They feel better, and that is the motivator in itself to continue doing the work, because it doesn't become work. You're definitely, as a positive gain, because you're getting so much more energy and enjoyment out of life. And so why would you return back just to, obviously there's addictions and different things as well.
Yeah.
But, these nutrient deficiencies are a big piece, but things to avoid, like I would say a very general thing, especially if you have a lot of inflammation in the body, you have autoimmune disease, it's gluten and dairy, hands down, right away, obvious. And, the research is there and the clinical outcomes are there, and it just makes sense. These are inflammatory molecules, casein in dairy, gliadin in gluten. And, these things will stimulate the immune system. So if you have a lot of hyperreactive inflammatory responses, or you have autoimmunity, you're attacking your own body, say your thyroid, every time you have gluten or dairy, it's actually damaging your thyroid. That's how you need to see about it, actually. And when it does that, it creates all these antibodies that are around for months afterwards. So these antibodies, once they're produced, it's 21 days for half of it to drop off. So that means it's the half-life of 21 days. So again, it affects you for months afterwards. So when you're in an autoimmune inflammatory state, you want to really just calm down the immune system. So it's about doing that root work to empty the bucket, but then it's about staying in that kind of lower inflamed state, and stress is a big part of that as well, and to allow the immune system to feel safe enough to be able to calm down and stop attacking itself.
Right.
And so those are the pieces, physiological, mental, emotional as well.
When we look at food, it's whatever's convenient. And whenever we look at our health that way, whatever's cheapest and most convenient, a lot of times, that's where we get into trouble. That's why we get sick. But whenever we see food as something that's an ally, that it shouldn't always just be the most convenient thing. It can't be the cheapest thing on the menu. And I'm not saying that it can't be affordable or it can't be convenient. But food has got to be looked at something as it's part of who we are as human beings.
So yeah, the last area I think that we should talk about today is something that everyone knows is there. I mean, we have a really chaotic, stressful world more than ever now.
Right.
And it has been. It's been getting increasingly so for many years and decades. Our lives are so much more complicated, and we're stuck in the, our mind, and we're stuck in the digital world. And it's our gift, but also something that really stresses us and strains us. And so we're trying to find this balance between, having the benefits of technology with balancing that with, harmony and enjoyment. And that joy and happiness is different than just productivity and, advanced technology. More friends is not better than a small group of friends, right?
Yeah,
Can give
yeah.
you support and love. So, I think that's really important is just, anything we do to strengthen this key part of the parasympathetic nervous system. This controls everything. We have something called the vagus nerve, which is the main nerve bundle that runs throughout our system, that controls our digestion and moves our gut and our heart rate and a lot of the physiological activities of the body. And when we're in fight or flight, all the blood flow goes away from our brain and from our digestion and from all this vagal nerve activity, goes into the muscles that run away from that tiger. So it cares about survival, doesn't
Right.
care about flourishing and thriving and hormonal balance and your libido and, just being energetic and happy.
Right.
And so, we really want to try to just shift the nervous system into this parasympathetic, calm, grounded, and relaxed state. And this is where healing is possible even, okay? And then everything else is enhanced through this process. And if you aren't dealing with this, and there's extreme trauma or, patterns that are keeping you externally in this very hyperreactive, anxious, fight or flight state, that's going to be an inhibition for this process. It's going to drain your adrenals and your hormones. It's going to inhibit your thyroid. It's going to cause more fat collection and inflammation into the system. It stops detox and repair. So, it's really that important. And so, but at the same time, I hate when patients come to me and they're like, yeah, my doctor just said that it's because I'm stressed,
Right.
that I'm sick. And it's like, yeah, that's definitely a piece of the puzzle, and that's a
Right.
component, and there are things that we can do to actually address that. Let's talk about that. But there's also a lot of physiological stuff going on too. Let's not blame any one of these specific things. I
Right.
think
Right.
that's really the tenet of functional medicine, that people oversimplify everything, and it's all vaccines, or it's all this or
Right.
that, or gluten, and it's all everything,
Yeah.
and it's different for every single person.
Yeah. So when you can address each little thing in your life, that it's probably enough to show a whole lot of improvement. So like with stress for us, exercise, being more active, meditation, more calming drinks. One thing I got rid of was caffeine, because I was dealing with a lot of high anxiety and suffering from adrenal fatigue. And so one of the things that you were kind of informing me about was, we can't allow our that fight or flight response to just always be engaged. You got to calm it down.
Yeah.
And caffeine can a lot of times stimulate that and activate it.
Yeah, it's whipping the horse, and
Yeah.
the horse will run faster and faster for so long, but eventually, it may collapse, and you don't want to get to that point. I like to think of our adrenals as the bank account of energy in our bodies, and a lot of times they're on low. And when you're taking caffeine and other stimulants, they are like credit cards or taking loans out. You're going into debt further and further, and it may help initially, but it's worsening the underlying situation. And again, everyone should, if you have coffee and tea, I'm a tea connoisseur. I have thousands of different teas, but there's so many other hundreds of herbs that have these adaptogenic qualities to help you adapt to your environment. So if you're really stressed and anxious and not sleeping and having insomnia, it can calm you down, be more relaxed and grounded. But if you're really low in energy and fatigue, they can strengthen your adrenals up to have more vitality and focus. And so these one herbs can actually do things. They're called adaptogens. They're tonics for the body, and they all have different specialties and focuses. And so I do love teaching patients to how to use these kind of more non-caffeinated ways of making these elixirs, I call them,
Right.
superfood elixirs, health elixirs. And, you want to have a good enough fat, a good amount of protein in these things. So it can be a coconut milk, for example, or another kind of non-dairy milk. We can use some oil. So MCT oil or coconut oil is a great one to be able to use there. It's got a lot of great antimicrobial effects as well. And these things just stabilize the blood sugar for long periods of time. These are actual real sources of energy that your body can make energy from.
Right.
Where caffeine stimulates the system, but it's not really providing the nutritional basis for you actually to create energy. So again, it's draining the system as well.
Yeah.
And so, in addition to that, we have, I like to add cacao as a base. That's one of my favorites. I'm a big fan of cacao.
Mm-hmm.
Cacao is, I feel, the solution in many ways. Just in this new generation, it represents, I think, where we're going. And what I mean by that is that caffeine in coffee, I think, represents the 20th century.
Yeah.
I think it's like the mind and productivity
Mm-hmm.
and the thoughts and the power there, that's been really put on a pedestal of what's important in life. And where cacao has a related kind of these xanthines, they're called, which caffeine is one. It's got something called theobromine, so it can activate in a way. It very much acts on the heart instead. And so, I studied with a shaman in Guatemala. His name is Keith. So props out to Keith. He taught me a lot, and was really doing a lot of deep work and ceremonial work with cacao and doing high doses of it. And it really brings you into your heart and, really makes you feel connected to others. And if you have that feeling of love and connectedness,
Right.
People are combining that now with, dance and sound healing and just going deep into your own psyche. With these kind of journeys, we could talk about all. There's so many plant medicines that are beneficial on this aspect to really look into your subconscious, these grooves, these patterns that we've been stuck in that are really not serving us, and to be able to rewrite those stories. So maybe that can be another podcast. But cacao actually has that kind of benefit. But on a daily basis, you're doing a much smaller dose. But that's the beauty of a medicine like this, something like chocolate that has around us at all times. And so I feel that the new generation, as we're going to be moving more away from coffee, and we're going to be moving more towards these other adaptogenic herbs of the plant world and other plant medicines and things like cacao. They're so easy and available.
Right.
And so, that's a basis. That's a pretty awesome drink already as just a replacement. But then you could add a bunch of those adaptogens like maca root. That's a Peruvian ginseng, really great for hormones and energy. It tastes nutty, so it tastes pretty good. We have all the medicinal mushrooms like reishi, which is calming and relaxing. You can make a reishi latte. You can make a lion's mane brew that helps with cognition and brain-derived neurotrophic factor and repair. And then you could make a golden milk, which is with turmeric and ginger and cinnamon, for example. The base is always kind of similar. You have a water, liquid, a nut milk base, and you might have some oil or something like that. But then you can experiment with the different herbs. So I have a guide on my website, if anyone's interested. That's really that third pillar, and stress is coming from all areas of relationships. It's very important to feel loved and connected and supported. It's very important to be sleeping well. It's very important to have things that you love and passion. Being in nature just reduces cortisol right away, and just a quick walk through a New York park, according to a study. And then active meditation and yoga, those are the traditional and tried, that have been very cultivated through disciplines that are very specific and deep in their extent of their ancient knowledge that we can utilize these days. It's like, wow, we have every single text in philosophy and access to anything and everything and all these passed down tools and meditations and techniques to be able to utilize. Right. So I'm certified in Kundalini yoga as well. And, I do teach specific techniques for specific things that are going on. And so, when people are having a lot of gut issues, maybe their digestive fire is weak, and they're not breaking things down. And so I'll give exercises to kind of like the breath of fire and different other kind of things, something like the fire wash breath, that you just really can activate that vagus nerve. You can put energy into the solar plexus and the digestion, which is breaking all this stuff down. And that enhances all the other physiological, biochemical, and supplement diet, lifestyle, and other things that we're doing. And so, there's casual, passive things, just of being happy in life. There's traditional meditation and yoga, which is a lot of research of just mindfulness and following the breath over quick periods of time. And then there's more conscious kind of things like, you can do vagal nerve exercises and gagging and cold showers and singing really loud and gargling. These all things activate that vagal nerve that strengthens that parasympathetic nervous system, which will then get the gut and everything else working better. And then we have so much research on mindfulness and meditation, and some of the studies on how it affects the DNA, I think, is really, really cool. and maybe how we can end this portion, because it's just, I've studied genetics for a long time, and that's what I specialize in more so than a lot of other people. And I've looked at thousands of people, and I just know all the intricacies of the biochemistry of what's happening, and can individualize the protocol according to that. We take 23andMe data and we put it into a software analysis program and generate a really detailed report that's 50 plus pages. But at the end of the day, it's 80% of it is epigenetic. It's how these genes are actually expressed in the world, and whether they are inhibited or whether they're increased in their capacity and production of whatever protein that is that for that gene.
Right. So when you're talking about genetics, you're talking about everybody's going to be different. Everybody, just because you have two people with a similar illness doesn't mean that their body's going to respond, because genetically they're more prone to one way or the other.
It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution for everyone. Everyone's different, and it's pretty cool with the genomic revolution that we can, just through our saliva, be able to send that off and understand our genetic predisposition to disease, and that helps us get people better to isolate exactly, okay, I'm not able to break this down, I'm not able to make this nutrient, okay, I have this risk of Alzheimer's, I have, this stuff, and then you can open up that pathway. You can have lifestyle and diet things to protect and prevent those issues from happening in the first place. So it gets people better, but prevents them from getting bad by knowing them more at a biochemical genetic level as well. But even this is really just the beginning, and it's only 20% of the picture.
Right.
80% again is epigenetic, so it's how we're expressing these genes in the world. And this is due to the diet, to the lifestyle exposure, to toxicity, and very much our state of consciousness, the stress and things that we're experiencing. And so if there's trauma in the system that's constantly throwing them into fight or flight, for example, that's going to be hard to balance everything. You could be meditating, doing all this stuff. You don't do that deeper work to relieve that trauma. It can keep the vicious cycle going. But with, the epigenetics here, the research on how, just say it's simple mindfulness meditation in a single 10 minutes, hundreds of genes that are anti-inflammatory start turning on, start making these anti-inflammatory peptides, and then hundreds of the genes that are pro-inflammatory start turning off. You can see them like a switch that just takes place from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system. And so, this just really helps, I think, me to understand just how dynamic we are, that we're constantly interacting with the environment and people and other people's moods, our moods. And, if we can have a practice that keeps us in that more parasympathetic system, in the flow of life and out of our mind and in our hearts, that's really affecting our genetic code and the expression at a molecular level itself of how we're, able to physiologically interact with the world as well. And one is constantly interacting and affecting the other. And so, this is really motivating as well, because, we know we pass down our genetics to our children, obviously, right? But the epigenetic regulation and the modification of what is expressed and what is inhibited is actually passed down as well. And so, for example, there was some city in Russia they were starved of nutrition, and the people survived, but there were some babies that were in gestating during this time of starvation, and their epigenetic modification was so crazy to look at, because it slowed down all their metabolism, and they were had a lot of chronic disease, and they all died really young and had other issues, because they're in this fear-based state of like, this world is going to hurt me, and there's not enough nutrition, so I need to slow down my metabolism. And then that methylation, that karmic trauma that's there, that before even birth or during birth, is affected. And so it's interesting that when you are actually doing your work to resolve your karmic trauma and your psychological aspects, the emotional aspects, when you're detoxing the body, when you're doing all the gut work at a physiological level, we have less inflammation, less toxicity, and better microbiome. But then at an energetic level, we're actually expressing the DNA in a completely different way, at a higher vibration, that really is able to allow us to have this optimal, vibrant life, living in safety and beauty and harmony and love, versus this fear with inflammation. The immune system, the emotions are just so interconnected.
Right.
And if we can do this work, we don't just help ourselves. We are, dealing with things that the past and the ancestors maybe have been dealt with the same patterns of, thought or physiological or emotional trauma for decades. We're doing it for them. We're doing it for ourselves, but we're doing it for our descendants. We're doing it for our children. And the work that we do, that is passed down not at just a physiological level, but at genetic level itself.
When we see everything as a whole and not individual, that's kind of what I'm getting out of this is whenever you see your entire life as a whole, it's all interconnected, and that's kind of the path to healing is let's dive into a lot of different things, the community of us.
I just want to say that healing is possible in all ways, no matter what you've been diagnosed with. And if there's something going on, as if you're having certain symptoms, if you have a chronic disease, there's something that's causing that.
Right.
And you just want to isolate what that is, and you want to start addressing it. And, you sometimes can't do it all yourself. Feel free to reach out to other people and supports and do your own research and find the practitioners. And you may not find it right away, and there might be just the first layer, and there might be other layers to this healing process. But as we go through this wormhole of, our own suffering caused by disease and our whatever, it really is the gateway to our higher selves and a better version of ourselves, and healing not just for ourselves, but for the people around us and our world. And so I just think that we just all should, there's no should, but there's just a automatic motivated feeling of just wanting to go down this path, because it has to be done eventually anyways. And it's kind of a return to more of a natural state of being.
Right.
And so I think a lot of the disease that we have is where we're disconnected from the actual principles and laws of the world that we live around, and that they're not natural anymore. And so we can talk about all these minutiae of the physical and physiological and functional medicine, etc., but the greater picture is that we live and out of balance with the earth and the world, and the stress and everything is all taking a toll on us. And it's a disease of consciousness, of believing that we're not part of nature, that we are separate from it. We can manipulate it, we can control it, we can abuse it and take from it constantly. But that's creating all this toxicity, and it's feeding back and hurting us. And we're in a time where, a lot of this is going to be revealed to us because we have to. That's why when we talk about functional medicine, and just like this being the new paradigm, it's a must. It's always going to go in that. Truth will always prevail, and this way of looking at the body has always been around. You can call it whatever you want. Functional medicine is just kind of a newer kind of thing that kind of embodies, and a lot of this embraces a lot of the allopathic Western things as well. But, we've always had this understanding.
Right.
I just think that if we can live in harmony with the world around us, the people around us, the, different plants and the rainforest and the ecosystems around us, really, that is where we will have true long-lasting healing. And we won't have to strive so hard to fight against the grain of really the reality of right now. And it's not just a physical reality, it's a state of consciousness that we need to evolve and grow from. And a lot of the suffering and pain and disease that we're walking through that is increasing, I believe, in this time is really to push us to evolve, to be able to walk through this wormhole to the other side. And there's a new world, a new consciousness awaiting for us. And it's going to be a good one. So I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would kind of wrap this up with, if you're somebody who knows someone who's sick, or you feel like you want to get on a better path of healing and better health and better life, or you're somebody like me who got sick and couldn't find help where I through conventional Western medicine, especially when it comes to chronic illnesses and some of these, I highly recommend you researching or even reaching out and going to an Integrative Wellness. If you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, definitely check out his website and find somebody who does functional medicine. Try to get to the root cause, and explore these different paths to healing. And like you just wrapped up in what you said, life it's all interconnected. So I really value that. I value your mindset and your approach. And thank you for helping me get better. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me addressing my issues I want to be able to do any of the things I'm doing right now without your help. So I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're feeling better, and it's a common story, and it's a common kind of dilemma. And through this, you're going to be even more empathetic with other people that are dealing with this, and you can share everything that you've learned in this journey to help with others. And so if other people are needing more support with these things, you might just learn more about functional medicine, and you can do that on my website. My clinic site is www.integrativewellnessrx.com. And there's some blogs and different things. You can learn more about the functional medicine and how it all works, and you can reach out. But I'm really creating this program, like I've been saying, to really make it a lot more cost effective, and you get community, and the community aspect is so important because it helps motivate you. You learn through each other, through the experiences that are happening, and you're just doing it as a whole. And it's gonna be a fun process over 8 weeks where we just jump through all systems of the body. And so check it out. It's a way you can really address a month of gut work and a month of detox in one of these main systems of the body that are often creating the inflammatory response, and reset them. So join me on that. It's the Vibrant Life Community Cleanse, and that's going to be at www.drdavidmorcom.com.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it. Definitely encourage everybody to go check this stuff out, and let's get healthy.